Thank you very much, Kamla. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I continue to marvel at your ability to unearth the kind of talent that you unearth for these conferences. Really is tremendous, and to see the younger people coming forward and the brilliant ideas. Javed's presentation this morning was really excellent. But let me just very quickly introduce our panelists this afternoon. We have Andre Gooden, who I think is going to speak first because I know he has a commitment at the Jamaica Stock Exchange, but he is the Group Business Development Manager of the Jamaica Stock Exchange with over 30 years of experience in areas of portfolio management, investment counseling, and financial planning. He has a BSc in marketing from State University of New York and an MBA from the University of New Orleans. We then have Robbie Rambaran, who is the Chief Executive Officer and Assistant Director and Financial and General Services of the Georgetown Public Hospital Corporation. He has over 20 years experience in both the public and private sectors with a master's in business administration. He's currently, as I said, the Chief Executive Officer of the Georgetown Public Hospital Corporation. And then we'll have Venishea Paynter, who is Company Secretary and Manager, Governance and Compliance at the NGC Group, who has done some very interesting work in the area of governance and compliance strategy and so on at the NGC Group. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Andre for his presentation. Thank you. Andre?
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for that kind introduction, and happy to be able to participate in this governance session. Kamla, I'm certainly happy for your invitation as usual, and always enjoy our conversations. Very deep subject, very important subject, and let me just say that one of the most important part of this exercise really is that we're looking for continuous improvement as it relates to our public entities, and that can only come with partnerships. In Jamaica, just to set the context, in about 2007, I believe it was, the government made a decision that they would move away from being investors in the economy somewhat to being facilitators of investments. As a result of that, some entities that were previously owned and managed by the government were divested, I should say. The one I know you all will recall is Air Jamaica, which was divested and ended up coming together with BWI to now form Caribbean Airlines. At the time, Air Jamaica was really a loss-making entity, and it was a heavy burden on the government's coffers on an annual basis, where those funds could have been used elsewhere. So the idea of diversification, of divesting it, was to really create some fiscal space, some cash flow to do other things to develop the country, and also to improve the governance and management of the organization by leaving it in the hands of more capable entities. And the rest is history as it relates to Caribbean Airlines. So along the way, over the years, as many opportunities as arose, the government sought to divest a lot of their holdings in entities that they figured would have been better managed in the private sector. So again, the idea of partnerships came to fruition. I'll speak specifically to late 2019, now just to come forward a little bit, where some other government assets were made available by divestment, but instead of being sold outright to other private entities, they were brought out through the stock exchange. The one that I want to speak about really at first is in 2019, Wigton Wind Farm, which was is an energy company, which was largely owned by the government, was listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange, raising some $11 billion of capital, and the government maintained a 10% holding, which has since been There was a cap on the amount that the government could hold that has been withheld. Now it's pretty much completely owned by public hands. That offer raised, like I said, $11 billion and created something like 12 or 13,000 shareholders. That was very successful, and of course, it set the pace for divesting of other entities. The most significant offer divestiture ever taken place on the stock exchange. The largest IPO ever took place in 2020, the year after Wigton was listed as a renewable energy company, where the Trans-Jamaica Highway Limited, which is the company that manages the east-west section of the highway that runs right through the island, achieved a significant milestone by raising 14.1 billion Jamaican dollars on the market, significantly increasing creating 36,000 new shareholders with one offer, oversubscription of 130%, and most significantly, 12,000 of those investors were new investors to the market. So it really created a complete new demographic with more females applying for this IPO than any other previously. Subsequent to that, in this year, 2025, the government again had another tranche of these shares holding that they decided to divest again. And this time, we received 24,057 applications, 13.9 thousand of which were new, again, investors. So the government has also outlined that there are other state-owned entities going forward between 2025 and 2026 that will also be divested, because the model for Wigton Wind Farm and, of course, Trans-Jamaica has yielded such excellent results from a governance standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, from a business development standpoint, that it just makes natural sense. Our public utilities, some of whom, for example, our energy company, our electricity supply, Jamaica Public Service, government still has a 40% stake in that. And their plan is to divest that under the same terms in order to increase and diversify the shareholding. Likewise, the Jamaica Mortgage Bank, another institution. So you see, it's a trend that has started. And we believe that this will augur great for the governance of these entities. Certainly, the first thing I would think of is the transparency and disclosure. The listing requirements that mandate regular financial reporting, audited accounts, timely disclosure of material events will certainly assist these entities in improving their own structure. Of course, you know, the transparency also enhances the accountability of the company's management and board, reassuring and giving more confidence to the investors and the shareholders. Of course, moving from being a government entity to being a publicly traded entity, the corporate governance guidelines of the Jamaica Stock Exchange will also apply, which are aligned with international best practices. So these entities that were once in government control now have to comply with rules related to independent governance, independent board members, audit and risk committees independently chaired, and shareholder rights and protection. This creates a framework for really more ethical and responsible decision-making. Another one to consider, of course, is increased board accountability. With public scrutiny and shareholder engagement, the board of directors must become more accountable, and the board of directors must have a certain minimum qualifications to maintain their positions. And the decision made by these leaders are more likely to be questioned and justified and aligned with shareholders' interests. The other thing that we notice is that it being listed as a once public entity, it meets certain standards of corporate discipline as well, because it improves the reputation of the company among securities regulators, investors, business partners, which can translate to more favorable regulatory and financial treatment. Several companies that have listed on an exchange, not alone government entities, find that if you went to borrow money from the bank as a private entity, suddenly when you become public and your accounts are transparent and available and you have a certain behavior as a accountable to the public, the rates that the bank would want to lend you at suddenly cut in half, because the risk associated with the entities is far less. Public listing also fosters more structured engagement with a wider base of investors, including the institutional investors, and it may advocate for further governance. This helps align the strategy of the company with broader stakeholder interest. Of course, the Financial Services Commission, which is our securities regulator, and the Jamaica Stock Exchange provide more monitoring and closer evaluation, reducing the risk of mismanagement, fraud, or insider abuse, which may or may not have happened when these were public entities. And I mentioned access to capital. There's access to cheaper capital through these companies being listed. So these are just some of the ideas which I believe will lead and can continue to lead to a more concise and a streamlined operation for these entities, transitioning from being publicly run entities to being in the transition from being government run entities to being in the hands of shareholders. And it really enhances the whole corporate governance framework if more and more companies are able to do something like this with a view to not just creating investor confidence, creating new opportunities for investors, which is very key, and also helping us to diversify our investment portfolios. So the advocacy for listing government entities on a public exchange are many. Is the only real challenge that currently exists now is that you have to attract qualified and suitably non-connected persons to govern these institutions, to be on the boards, to be independent, and to be able to report favorably as an independent rather than being a connected party. So we find that it has worked very well, and the government seems to be sticking to this strategy of enabling investors rather than being an investor themselves. So that would be my brief presentation, and I really think that the opportunity to advocate along these lines is one I'm thankful for, and I would encourage the Institute to continue to push for private-public partnerships, which will enable the benefit of the talent in the private sector to enhance the quality of the operations of the public sector.
Great. Thank you very much, Andre, for that. I think it was very great that you brought us up to date on some of those developments in the Jamaica stock market, which I think is probably easily the most vibrant stock exchange in the region, and probably one could see some of the reasons why. We have had in Trinidad and Tobago, at least, we've had some parallels here in terms of the divestment of state enterprises in the past, although in some sense that has tended to be reversed, and you have more state enterprises being created later on. So let's move on now to Robbie Rambaran for your presentation. Robbie, over to you.
Thank you, Doc. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start it out by reading something from the president of Guyana. And actually, when I woke up this morning and I picked up my phone and was scrolling through Facebook, he just came on alive. This is about 7 hours ago. And he said his government is proud to lead Guyana into a new digital era, rooted in innovation, inclusion, and efficiencies. Digital Guyana is our commitment to build a modern state where technology makes public service faster, more accessible, and more responsive. Powered by innovation and anchored by our national e-identification system, this transformation will make Guyana a digital leader in the region and a better place to live, work, and raise a family. And I thought that if I could have shared his commentaries on this platform, I wouldn't have needed to make a presentation, because and for those who can have access to his Facebook page can look at his live, and it was very much applauded that a regional leader, a head of state, is taking the lead in digital transformation in state-owned enterprises in the state sector. I think gone are the days when these things used to be a bottom-up approach, where mostly the end user sees the need for technology in delivery of efficient and effective services, a more citizen-centered service. But now we can be proud of this region, that we have leaders who are really talking the talk and they are walking it as well. And it's no longer and when you had to do a bottom-up approach, there were so many barriers and red tapes and bureaucracies that we had to, and hurdles that we had to get over in order to achieve that objective. We as the end users and as the one at the bottom sees the need. So it's really, I think in the Caribbean, we have leaders who is really embracing digital transformation, and they have seen the benefit of it. So as this topic today is the digital transformation in state sector enterprises, it presents both exciting opportunities and significant risk. And I want to narrow this down to a project that we are doing at the hospital. We are doing in the health sector, but we are doing it at the hospital we are heads as the first phase, because the hospital where I work, it's the national hospital. So we are currently working on a electronic health record system, one patient, one record. And I will focus a little bit on that, but it's the same opportunity and risk for other sectors of implementation as well. And one of the major benefit and major opportunity of digital transformation is that it improves efficiencies and productivity, and it reduces that manual work. It does help significantly also in the digital workflow, and it streamlines so many processes. It helps us to reduce those redundancies and those bottlenecks that are available in a manual system, where you have to make several documentation for one transaction because to achieve that internal controls that you need. But with the digital systems, we are moving away from that. And another major benefit, and loudly talk about these days, is transparency and accountability. The digital system enhance transparency and accountability. We have real-time data available. We can audit the process. We can audit people logs. We can measure productivity by doing this. I spoke at opening about the president's commitment about better service delivery to citizens, a citizen-centered delivery, e-governance approach, and its platform improve that accessibility and reduce red tapes. It comes with mobile app. At the hospital here, we are going to give people mobile app where they can know when to come to refill their prescriptions, when they will know the next appointment date, they will get notification, they can access their medical record on their mobile devices. And so these are some of the benefits, 24 hours accessibility. And largely, and from my experience being in the public sector, data collection, data gathering is always a challenge. So to make decision in the boardroom, to make data-driven decisions are sometimes really difficult, because while you, in some instances, while you capture the data, it may not be clean. And that poses a lot of challenges. In budgeting, in determining seasons, patterns, trends, in a manual system, it's quite difficult. So it surely will help us into data-driven decision making. There's a whole talks about AI, and I really don't want to get much into AI. That's a whole different level. But with AI and its predictive analytics and all these sort of stuff, will surely optimize resource allocation and generate dashboards and will also help us with evidence-based policies and operational decisions. I decided to put this one in about cost saving over time. And then this speaks about the paper and the storage and the human error. But I'm a little bit here and there with that one. While yes, it can reduce paperwork, it can reduce human error, you can actually reduce the number of persons you needed to do specific tasks because of removing of those redundancies and bureaucracies in the system. But IT, digital transformation, IT governance, IT infrastructures, licensings, these things comes at very huge cost. And while many of the articles that I have read in the past and on recent discussions, that it speaks about an eventual reduction. But when you look at many of these systems now, and you have to build out an IT infrastructure with all of its component, you find that we are now going to roll out this electronic health record system. But to get on the electronic health record systems, we need users to have corporate emails. So corporate emails, for those who will be signing into the system, comes at a huge cost. So you have to get 365 and there are some of the in some cases you need all the feature or not, or some of the features, but all these comes with a cost, and the maintenance and having the staff, the IT staff in a public in a state-owned enterprise where it's 24-hour service or critical service, essential service, police, hospital, airports, fire, and etc. You need a large IT workforce. So when you can reduce the staff, because you need a large IT workforce to work 24-hour maintenance, troubleshooting be available all the time. So while you may reduce the staff at the processes end, the IT infrastructure maintenance end will increase. And then we go to cloud storage is a heavy cost. And then also another opportunity is you have your workforce upskilling, and if I will say this word, cultural modernization, breaking away from the old norm. There will be new digital tools and upskilling, and obviously one of the big opportunity is attracting young talents these days who are more IT driven as opposed to a few years ago. And some of the risks are cybersecurity threats. Largely, a lot of monies will have to be spent to ensure that your systems are foolproof, that they have the necessary security features in them. There was a bit of an interesting conversation at the opening of the governance week on Sunday as well, because government entities hold very sensitive information across, and they are real targets. They are prime targets for cyber attacks. One of the challenges can be accessibility, a digital divide, where people in certain area may not have internet connectivity. They might have access to the mobile devices and different. So that really widens that gap, the social economic gap in terms of accessibility. They can be resistant of change. People don't like changes. Everybody wants change, but nobody likes to change. And because people are stuck in its old norms and culture, it can be a very difficult thing. And as part of our rolled out at the hospital, where we were building the IT infrastructure, so we planned this very carefully. We built out the IT infrastructure over the last 3 years, because this is one of the challenges. A lot of people want to do IT digital transformations, but they don't build out that infrastructure. So we spend time building out that infrastructure, and then so we have the infrastructure. We went out to tender. We get the software, and this, I must say this. I'm proud of this. While the company Riomed that won the bid, they are registered in the UK. They have a large presence, especially from Trinidad. A lot of the developers are from Trinidad. So I'm proud to know that our Caribbean people are working on this project. And what we identified, one of the major risks would have been change. So part of that project, we included KPMG as being the change agent. So they will work with my staff and all of us here at the hospital in change management. So that will surely mitigate that resistance to change. And implementation cost, that can be a major the risk already, and I spoke about that. And in some of the cases, in some mitigating strategies in a digital transformation is perhaps adopt a phase implementation so that you manage risk and build capabilities gradually. That's what we are doing with the national electronic health records. We are focusing on the hospital first. We'll document lessons learned, and while we are doing at the hospital, we are not doing a big bang approach, but we are doing departments, units, one at a time. So 3 of the main components in the hospital is pharmacy, a lab, and medical imaging, which is X-ray, CT scans, and so we already digitalized those. Another thing I put on the priority is that I don't want people to come to wait a long time at the hospitals for their clinic appointments. So we are doing scheduling, and then we are moving to, so scheduling comes with the ambulatory clinics, and then we're moving to the emergency room. Then we'll do outpatient as the last. So a phased approach to help mitigate, phased approach and implementation will help you to mitigate that risk and build capacity gradually as we go on to other phases. I identify cybersecurity risks, invest in that, robust data protection policies. It's costing us currently at the hospital about $3 million a year now since we built out our IT infrastructure. We have a dedicated internet access that is costing me about $500,000 per year, because with all the digitalization, we need stable internet connectivity and all the security features and emailing. So it's a cost, but you have to invest in cybersecurity, because at a click of a finger, this can all vanish. Train, retrained, train, upskill, retrain staff, employees to the easy transition and reduce that resistance. That is what I have KPMG working along with us. Develop inclusive digital strategies and ensure access for all demographics. Promote interagency collaboration to share best practices and infrastructure. So some of these are what we're doing. I mentioned them before about document lessons learned. We are doing several things too that will, like we have a jingle competition, we have different activities that try to stimulate the interest of the employee so that they can to attract them to be on board and be a part of this change. So with that pieces and few words, that's my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Robbie, for that. I think there's a lot there for us to chew on during the discussion. A lot of interesting issues that you've raised, and some that I think that we can query during the Q&A. So let me just go on quickly to Venishea Paynter for her presentation, and then we'll come back and open the discussion to the audience. Venishea?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and good day, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you also to Kamala and to the CCGI team for the opportunity to be here today. We are very grateful. When we first heard that we were invited to participate in this groundbreaking event and to share a snippet of NGC's digitization journey to date, I must admit we were really excited because for a long time, we have been committed to delivering future sustainability for NGC through transformation, and that included digital transformation. And what we want to share today is basically just a snapshot of our approach, our assessments, and our achievements to date as we continue along our digitization journey as a state sector company. So I kind of broke it up into a little bit of steps so we can follow the progress. So the first step that we did on our side and we recommend is that you map your approach to the digitization of your company. And what that really means is that you must understand your unique state sector and organizational perspective. So for us, what that meant is, one, we needed to understand the needs of our entity to ensure that whatever solutions we came up with were fit for purpose. We needed to identify and scale our unique risks. And that's kind of doing an internal assessment to make sure that, we understand what is going to happen if something goes wrong. So while NGC is not a public-facing entity and doesn't have public data in that form, we are an entity that has a big impact on the national economy, budgets, and governmental spend. We also, number three, we had to consider the local international landscape and any risk attendant with same. So this is more of an external assessment, just trying to determine your impact and influence and external forces and factors that may impact your decision-making, your implementation process, and your ongoing security. Four, we wanted to identify what is available in the market. Make sure that you do research and that you can create value for your company. Five, assess your ability to secure and implement the solution. So can you justify the use of the public purse? Because as was said earlier, it is an expensive process sometimes to digitize, right? Are you using your organizational resources well in this process? Do you have the change management systems in place to ensure successful implementation? And finally, you must maximize use of available resources internally. As we say, buy local. If you have the resource, it's already paid for, it's already engaged, use it. Yeah. After you finish that level, the next plan is that you go to step 2, which is to identify potential wins for your company, your stakeholders, and your industry. Now, what we wanted to point out here is it's not a one-size-fits-all assessment because we do need to look at each company to make sure what you're coming up with in terms of wins and benefits are matched to your entity and they're also matched to your business operations and sector. But there are a couple potential standard wins that most companies can say that they will benefit from if you digitize. One of them is improved productivity and efficiency, which is moving from the transition from manual to digital focus. So you would expect to see reduced waste in repeated processes. You would expect to gain some efficiencies in the execution of your business operations. You would expect a better use of time and resources with less manual input being required and reduced costs, including labor costs, because you'll need less manual inputs into any process. You would also expect to see improved retrievability of critical data and ease of access to data. For state sector company like NGC, remember we live in the FOIA world, freedom of information. So it is very critical that we have access to our data easily, that we can be able to withdraw that information if we need to provide it for these cases. In addition to that, we are also constantly fighting against the perspective that there's greater risk of corruption, more inefficiencies in state sector companies. So you always need to focus on improving transparency, responsiveness, statutory compliance, robust compliance management systems, and good governance. And digitization allows you to do that as well. You also expect to see a more modernized organization and processes, which of course can enhance your stakeholder experience, and it can also improve your competitive outlook on sustainability. You expect to see as well improved reporting and agile and effective decision-making. Your access to information and analytics in particular allows your board and your management to make more data-driven decisions, which are better for the company and protects the board and management in the execution of their functions. You would also expect to see expanded reach and influence. And I mean, I will use this whole governance week as an example. We are here participating in a totally and entirely virtual experience, and people are all over the world participating in this, and it's an amazing thing. So we can, in fact, use it to really expand our reach and influence. And then, of course, you have the increased level of adaptability and agility at the organizational level. I mean, we don't want to talk about it, but we all remember COVID and the COVID pandemic, and how all of us as companies and organizations had to very quickly pivot. How do we survive this period? How do we continue operations? And digitization allowed a lot of us to survive at that time. And in fact, those that did not digitize as quickly or transition as quickly were not as successful. So after you've done that assessment in terms of your benefits, in typical legal fashion, you have to find out what can go wrong. And that means you need to look at your risk. And when you're looking at your risk here, one of the things that we have to admit, and unfortunately it's a reality, digitization inevitably increases the risk of cybersecurity, data loss, and data breaches leakage. Because at the end of the day, what you're actually doing is increasing your points of contact. You're creating more points of contact. When it's manual systems, you're in one location, wherever your building is located, that's where your whole source of risk is. But now, of course, you've expanded those points of risk by having more and more points. So there are two big potential risks that you look at, and we kind of bucketed it into two. One, potential failure of your actual system or application that you've onboarded or built, which can result in catastrophic loss of information, etc. Or two, the external risks, where you're looking at cybersecurity attacks, data breaches, unwanted disclosures of information, hacking of systems, and data loss. So the first thing that on our side, how we look at it is that we look at the scope and level of impact. So the question is, what happens if something goes wrong? Is there material non-public information within your possession, which may be proprietary data, public information, state secrets, cabinet decisions that have not made the newspapers yet, financial information? What type of information will go out there and impact the company and potentially even the country if it gets out? We also have to look at the fact that we're operating in a country where you have lagging legislation, where we are not quite up to the mark as yet when it comes to AI, electronic data protection, and cybersecurity protections. More importantly, whereas we don't have the support in terms of enforcement of claims related to security breaches and data loss. Then the issue of lack of standardization comes up. As a state, as a state-owned enterprise like NGC, we don't have the support of the whole public sector in terms of how do we approach digitization. Is there a map we can follow? Is there a map we can agree? I believe earlier they said, success requires partnerships. I wrote that down. And yes, collaborating would help everyone on this side. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can work together to create it. And then you have increased third-party risks, because of course we have service providers, vendors. They're the ones that our information are with. They're the ones maintaining the cloud in another country, out of our direct control. How are those multiple points of potential breach throughout the supply chain being managed? Then we need to look at focused legal and policy frameworks. Do we have the policies and procedures internally that are focused on cybersecurity, use of AI, and data protection? And is that supported by a robust legal framework within your organization to ensure enforcement and accountability at all levels? And then, of course, change management becomes also very important and was mentioned earlier as well. Are you managing change impactfully? Are you doing it well? Because digitization, and this is another reality we have to admit, it can result in loss of jobs. And that is something that has to be very carefully managed within the organization as well. So I just wanted to also just give a very quick snippet of our NGC's digitization journey and some of the things that we were able to achieve since we started. Now, I'm using the start date of 2018, give or take. Not to say that we did not put things in place before that, but that's when we were more consciously driving towards digitization. So one of the things that we would have done at NGC is we would have onboarded the S4HANA Ariba system, which is an ERP system, which touches several core processes, including projects, finance, and procurement, to improve the efficiency of the interrelationship between these work streams, therefore making the end-to-end product simpler and easier, not only for its staff, but also external parties. We utilize orbital eye, drones, and satellite images to allow for real-time monitoring of NGC's pipeline across the country. Not only is there an HSSE benefit in terms of improved safety and an environmental benefit because it allows us to monitor our emissions more carefully and support NGC Group's green agenda, but it also creates opportunity for collaboration with other energy sector companies who will want to benefit from the use of these types of devices and systems. And now, of course, we can create partnerships. We also have what we call the Compliance Online Portal System, or the COP system, which is a homegrown system. It was designed and developed internally within NGC with our IT specialists, and it allows for online evidence-based compliance reporting to strengthen our compliance systems within the organization. We also would have established another homegrown system in 2020 called the Conflict of Interest System, or the COI system, online system, which allows online access real-time to everyone within the organization, so that not only can we now have COI reporting updated, analytics being tracked and measured, and measuring our risk as well from a COI perspective. And all of this is permissible across the NGC group of companies. So it's not just NGC, it's actually our other companies as well. We also use Power BI application, which is an application that facilitates a cross-group data analytics information sharing, and it's linked to our core activities, and also allows board real-time access to different things happening within the organization, changes in terms of critical information, etc. And we are also now in the process of developing another homegrown system in conjunction with our IT specialists, which is a cross-group knowledge sharing solution. The purpose of which really is to ensure that critical governance and compliance information is accessible to everyone, including our directors, at the click of a button. So one last thing before I close, I just want to reinforce, and I believe it was said earlier as well, reinforce the importance of those supporting systems, structures, and frameworks. If you are going to go on a digitization journey, it's not just about the solution that you have chosen or the solution that you've decided to build. It's also about what exists below it and around it, and how that supports, the establishment of the system and the successful implementation of the system. And one of the things we've done at NGC is we have a board-approved governance strategy, first of its kind in a state-owned enterprise, which is focused on implementation of our governance and compliance framework with a unique focus on use of analytics and automation of key processes across the organization. We also have, as part of the corporate governance and compliance team, a part of the division, a department that is focused purely on research and development of new applications and solutions, analysis of GC-related data, and development of systems and policies and along that line, transitioning of processes into automation. This is really intended to ensure that our board has the line of sight of key performance data and trends that could impact risk management and decision-making in the future. We have a policy framework development focus on cybersecurity policies, use of IT-related assets, confidentiality of data, all as part of our code of conduct and other key policies. We also have a robust legal and compliance support system, which is really intended to be aligned to the achievement of the objectives of the organization, including access to legal frameworks, having strong KPIs developed, a gap analysis of our systems and structures, tracking our successes, return on investments, value creation for the organization based on digitization, as well as our failures, because at the end of the day, we do have to ensure we also onboard lessons learned. And finally, we have ensured that we have a very active engagement with third-party vendors, because as we said, a lot of our risk lies with third parties. So we have to make sure that we actively engage and monitor them, including having audits conducted on their activities and compliance certifications from time to time to ensure that they maintain the required standards of safety and security in relation to the cybersecurity and data protection of all the information that NGC has in its possession. So that's more or less my contribution. Thank you. I know it's a bit of a mouthful.
No, it was quite excellent, Venishea. I must say, very, very comprehensive, and I must say very impressive. Very impressive. I would say that those of us who have been in the private sector, a lot of what you said would have been very familiar, particularly larger public listed companies and so on. But I think to hear what you've articulated there for a state enterprise, and of course, NGC is perhaps the biggest state enterprise that we have that operates in the commercial sector. So in a way, it's not surprising, but I think really excellent that you have put those kinds of systems and so on in place. So let me open up the discussion. I think, unfortunately, Andre had to leave because he has a stock exchange annual general meeting to attend, which conflicted with this. But I think the conversation so far between Robbie and Venishea has raised a number of issues and a number of questions, which, well, first I can try and pose some of them to Robbie and Venishea, and then open it up to others to raise some questions. Again, very interesting what you all are doing, Robbie, in terms of your hospital electronic patient record system. One of the things that we know is, for example, the NHS in England was recently the subject of a ransomware attack, I think, a few years ago. And I know that you've mentioned the question of cybersecurity. Venishea mentioned the importance of when you're digitizing your enterprise, you open yourself up to the world, really. And I think particularly for things like electronic patient systems, you're giving patients access. The determined hacker or the skilled hacker can then get access to your systems generally and can cause a lot of difficulty. So even the NHS in England, I think it was around 2017, 2018, was the subject of an attack, a successful ransomware attack, actually, which resulted in the death of patients and so on. So I wonder if you wanted to address that first, Robbie, in terms of how you are looking to deal with that kind of problem in terms of what you're implementing.
Thank you. So like I said earlier, we are investing heavily on the infrastructure. There are a lot of firewalls and different, I'm not the tech guy to tell you all the fancy names that they're called,
Yes.
but I know we have invested in a lot of different applications to ensure the firewalls and different things to ensure we can prevent. I mean, there are people who this is their job. They sit down all the time, tries to how they can hack a system and hold it at ransom. And there have been more recent cases. You spoke about the NHS in 2017. There have been more recent cases right in the US where there have been cyber attacks. So one, we are investing in the necessary solutions to help mitigate that. And importantly, as well as to train the staff, sensitize the staff on how to use and different do's and don'ts, what not to plug into their computer, what don't open things that they don't know. That people will get email with some sort of things telling you click on this, you'll win some money or something. And even though I know one of the big things, and I now recall when I said there was a ransomware in the US, and this is how it happened, through a QR code. So there was a QR code. So while QR code is such a good thing, people manipulate it. So I can put out a flyer for a vacancy and say, scan this QR code. I can put it on my website or my Facebook page and say, scan this code and you'll get the terms of reference for the vacancy. but then somebody can go and manipulate that same code and change it up, and you scan and put it somewhere, and you scans it, and you gets a virus and attack the system. So other than the actually infrastructural investments and solutions, it's about upskilling the staff with the do's and don'ts and train them as well.
How are you all addressing the question of the privacy, because you're talking about patient records and so on. Presumably at some stage, you say you're doing a phased implementation.
Yeah.
So you're going to be rolling out across not only departments, but also, I presume, across hospitals
That's right.
in Guyana, so that if I to be in some part of Guyana, that they can access my record in that hospital, even though I might be a patient in Georgetown. But how are you dealing with the question of privacy, of what is sensitive patient medical information?
So first, everybody will have a sign-in credentials, and your sign-in credentials will have ways to control it, what you should have access to and don't have access to. So because if you're working in the lab and the radiology and pharmacy, you should really only have access to those records that are relevant for your operation, but not doctor to patient information. So there are those records, and then there are records that from one facility to another, you can only access it by a formal referral. And if with the one patient, one health system, if you come to Georgetown Hospital and you have a record, and let's say you go to another part of the country and you go in, there are basic information that you will get. There is a discharge summary you will be able to, the doctor will be able to read, and that will include the type of medications that you are on. Because one of the big things that we find in a manual system is what they call polypharmacy, meaning that you can go to, there are patients who are in multiple specialty clinics and they get prescriptions, and let's say you go in a surgery clinic and you're in a medical clinic, they don't really know what medication you are on with a manual system, and they can prescribe medicines that can, and in its combination, can have adverse effect. So it's all about a discharge summary that people can have access to. Someone in, let's say, Berbice, which is a different part of Guyana, a hospital cannot get into the medical record at Georgetown Hospital and read the entire medical record of a patient unless the patient is referred, and when it's referred, their system administrator will grant you access to it.
Okay, good. And so in that regard, how are you all dealing with the question of inclusion? For example, the elderly, people who are not necessarily computer literate, they don't have, you say you're using a mobile app. So people have to have smartphones and so on to be able to access that and so on. How are you dealing with the inclusion problem?
It's not just a mobile app, there is a web portal as well for those who don't have a mobile device. But I think we're at an age where a lot of people have phones. Almost everybody have phones. And what we will have to do, it's going to take a lot of promotions, a lot of educations. Currently now the guys are rolling out televisions in all the various ambulatory clinics. We're going to do a lot of mass communication with KPMG. We develop a communication plan. So we will have to work with the patient. This is something completely new. It's a game changer. It will have its challenges, but we have to have staff who are committed to the process and also advocate and work with the patients on how to get this. That's why we're not going to give them full access to their medical records. That is, ideally, you should be able to sign into your app and get your full record, medical records. But because people are not, they are not cyber security cognizant and so forth, wanting a better word right now, is that we want to phase it out to them. So you may have your appointments and your refills date for your medication. You may have your lab results on it, but for your entire medical record and say your past history, doctor's notes, and so that will be a phased approach down the line until people you understand that people gets because this is when people signs in as well. We will have an audit trail of their logged in, and we'll see the kind of things that they do and how we can help them because that itself poses a threat, a security threat, by everyone having access to the system, and primarily the third party. I know Venishea spoke about third party vendors, and that's one of our big concerns because our radiology information system, our lab information systems, these are or PACS, which is a patient archiving system where our medical imagings are stored, CT scans, MRIs, X-rays, ultrasounds, all these imaging are stored. They are third party. There are some 7, I can't remember the code that they use to integrate all these solutions, but still there are risks with the third party.
I know you said
Especially when some of them don't want to host local, and they prefer cloud hosting. So those things, those things possess a lot of challenges too.
I know you said that you're not pursuing AI in the context of your electronic hospital or patient record system, but are you looking at the use of AI in terms of for the physicians now?
No,
I mean, Guyana is a big country. Whether
Doc,
you're using AI for diagnostics.
I don't think I said that we are not exploring it. I said I don't want to venture into it. Maybe a bit on charter waters because AI comes with a lot of challenges as well.
It does, yes.
Yes, but we do have AI here, like our radiology reports, our medical imaging, CT, MRIs. We have AI interventions already, and
fantastic. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But these are the basic, these are just basic in that is available in the field of radiology in some area, but we can go deeper into it. Also, we do have some of them, and I guess that's where the world is going as well. So you will find more and more. We will roll out AI as we go ahead.
Yeah. Any questions for Robbie? Or,
I was just glad that you went there, Dr. Farrel, because in truth, I know that some of the greatest advances in AI and robotics has been in the medical field. So I'm happy to hear that the Georgetown Hospital is using, because particularly in the areas of radiology, that's really been in use for years in a lot of the hospitals, using the AI in helping to do the readings. But I want to push Robbie a little bit and ask him. I know he said he didn't want to venture too much into AI, but Robbie, in terms of even corporate administration of the hospital, the use of AI can make a huge difference. If we looked at the presentation, for instance, from Ricardo Allen on Monday, you can have an entire AI workforce that would be doing a lot of the administrative work that reduce the burden and improve the efficiency of the staff. So is that something that you would be open to exploring with your corporate side of hospital management?
For sure. And let me say this, I'm not against AI, but AI comes with a lot of challenges as well. So we may want to take it one step at a time to get there. And for sure, AI will help us to do a lot of stuff, but in operational, in healthcare, I'm a little bit worried about the empathy sides of AI and as compared to human aspects. And there's a lot of downside to it. But I guess there are people who sitting down every day working on this. I have been to many hospitals across the world and see how they use AI and different robotics. And recently we saw one guy sit somewhere in Florida and did a surgery in Australia through robotics. And we do AI here for some of our pathology testings and reports as well. We have lots of telemedicine, pathology service here at the hospital. So if we need a second opinion, we can share our slides virtually with hospitals like Mount Sinai and Northwell, which are two of the largest healthcare providers in New York State. and Apollo Hospital in India. So so through these systems we have we are using AI, and that's the future. So we will get there for sure. I mean, operation, for example, HR onboarding, selection, recruitment, it's whole can be all AI generated, and some of the equipment that we are buying that comes with these different modules to electronics alerts and diagnosis and could obviously fix itself in like, for example, a sterilizer that we equip instrument sterilizer that we recently procure. So it is the future, but I don't want us to get, sometimes we try to get carried away with AI and in digital transformation. I think it's too big of two big components to want to roll out at the same time.
Could I ask Venishea, I mean, very comprehensive presentation, let me just say, and really very impressive stuff that you all are doing at NGC. But one of the things that struck me in your discourse, which hadn't kind of struck me before, because we're talking about state enterprises here, and in fact, you mentioned that if somebody gets access to your system, they may well end up having, like, for example, things like cabinet minutes, which are in your enterprise, yeah, so they get access to that, which may have to do with, for example, petroleum exploration strategy or that kind of thing, and so on. So yeah, so I was kind of struck by that. I don't know if you want to comment further on that.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's something that we had to sit down and really think through, because I think the first point of contact when people think about data loss and data leakage is they tend to think about the loss of personal data. So if you're front-facing public entity and you have a lot of personal data of persons,
Right.
that becomes the risk. But all state enterprises has some level of sensitive information. The question is just what it is. So if we're now looking at being part of the energy sector and having that kind of information, which, I mean, we don't want to say too much in that regard, it can become politicized, you know how it goes.
Yes, exactly.
It is important that, those decisions as they are being made are protected, because it can affect the long-term planning, strategies, budgeting of the country, of the entire economy. So we do understand that information is part of what we deal with as part of our job in the energy sector, as an energy sector company. We also have information, and we have to remember that too, of other energy sector companies that also would not want their plans to be shared, their pricing approaches. We have all of that information within our possession. So we also have to be extremely careful as to how we approach these things. And I know you mentioned AI, you didn't ask me about that, but I'll just jump in for my 2 cents.
Just about to.
Yes, despite the fact that I might be giving away my age here, that I myself have a great fear of AI, only because I watched the Terminator movies and I'm convinced that things are going to go very wrong, right? But that's just my personal view. I do understand it's something that we have to look at, and that is the way of the future, right? But even in that regard, it does tell you that you have to be very careful in implementation. And I agree that you have to have a very tempered approach. Not necessarily a late adopter. We don't want to say we don't want to get there, but you need to be careful, because sometimes what's at stake is a little bit more than what the private sector has to treat with because of your public status. And that needs to be factored in as you transition your company. So I would say that right now, NGC does not use AI formally at all, because we have not yet built the systems around it to be able to build in those policy and legal framework and protections that we would need to ensure we can use it effectively. Of course, I must say thank you, Kamala. I've been listening the last couple of days, and I've learned that there are some options and methods to be able to venture into AI in a more safe manner. So it's something that we can learn from each other again, and that collaboration. I thank you for the opportunity to be able to do some of that and learn, get a little bit slightly different perspective. Not everything is Terminator. Yeah, but that's kind of our approach. We're very cautious. I would say cautious when it comes to AI, ensuring that, if we do go that route, it's going to be within parameters, certain parameters.
One of the things is that, of course, in respect of state-owned companies in particular, I mean, it applies to all enterprises. But anytime we're talking about digital transformation, use of technology, and so on, and this goes back from the time we started to introduce computers into organizations. This question, and you actually raised it in your presentation about loss of jobs. In respect of the early introduction of computers back in the 1980s and 1990s and so on, people like me and my age remember those days. And in fact, it didn't happen. It didn't. There was not a net loss of jobs as a result of automation. But it would appear from what we are seeing and what we are reading that this time, in respect of the use of artificial intelligence, there is unquestionably going to be a loss of jobs. I mean, this has happened or it is happening in the case of manufacturing, for example, where in some enterprises, in manufacturing enterprises, there are literally no employees on the factory floor, right? So the factory floor is robots, and the factory is running literally. They call them lights out manufacturing factories because you don't need lights because there are no humans in there, and they're running 24/7. So with a state-owned enterprise, governments are particularly sensitive about the question of job loss. And so my question, I think, to both of you, to both Robbie and to Venishea, is how are you dealing with that question as you implement what you're implementing, looking at dealing with the politics, if you like, of job loss versus the benefits of implementing, digital technologies and so on in your organization? So either of you.
I'll go first because I think it's something I have to deal with every day. At the hospital, we have close to 2,500 employees.
Okay.
A large percentage of them are unionized.
Yeah.
But and in healthcare, there's a large turnover. So as I don't think we, as you said, politically want to go ahead firing people. I think that will have to be a decision that we will take, that eventually over time people will be phased out, whether in terms of retirement or they resign from the institution. And like I said, there is a relative high turnover in healthcare workers, not the medical staff, so more so, but the other support staff and administrative staff, operations. So eventually you will be able to level out. But there's no way from a state-owned enterprises someone will do a mass termination, exodus of employee. That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
That's some
Venishea?
votes. When we lose some votes.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need to be cautious when it comes to these things as well. I found it very interesting that you said earlier, when with the onset of the computers and coming in, that there was that fear as well, and it didn't pan out. Now, what we may have seen in those days, because I'm not as young as I look, what we actually saw in those days was that you had a kind of trading out. So when some jobs left, some jobs came in, right? So when you looked at the overall, it netted out. Yeah.
Yeah.
What we are seeing here and now, as you rightly said, may not be that at all, because it might be wiping out entire types of jobs, period, across board, potentially. Which of course is something you have to factor in. But as a state enterprise, again, you don't have the free will, not to say that you'd want to do that even in a private sector company. It can have a big impact as well on your reputation and all of that outside as well. So you would want to be cautious either way when you're dealing with people's livelihoods. But definitely for a state sector company, you need to bear that in mind, because yes, you may have a certain number of people who may now need to transition because that kind of job is no longer required. I think you are going to have to, in addition to what Robbie said, I would say you would also have to look to see whether or not there's any capacity building potential. Is there anyone who can transition to another type of role that is still required? And if those persons are, and I would have to say, can do it and are willing to do it, because you have to also have people who are willing to learn and to upskill. And if they're able to do that, then you can keep them, longer term, it wouldn't have to be part of your transition plan. But it may come down to the point, and again, that will have to be a policy decision, governmental level, in relation to how we're going to treat with this going forward. But I do think either way, it would have to be a very careful decision because of the wider, again, impact that you may have because you're a state enterprise.
Yeah.
And if I should say
And-
this, Doc, if
Yeah,
I should
yeah.
say this, and I agree with Vanessa, so we digitalized our accounting system. We bought the accounting software, Sage 300, and it comes with the payroll software. And we had about 7 staff that became redundant. But in the process, by accident, we discovered that these 3 of the 7 staff, they were at the University of Guyana pursuing a bachelor's in computer science. So while we were planning ahead for this EHR, we decided to ask them if they're interested to go to the IT department. And before we could have even finished the asking, they already packed up. So they went there. Then there were some others who were actually transferred unwillingly so from the finance department to the inventory management unit. So there are people, they will still need staff, and you need to upskill. I spoke a lot about upskilling staff, training staff, keep retraining them. So sometimes, like I said, we keep saying that it will, and I said this in my open presentation, sometimes we see it reduce staff, but there are areas that will require more staff to support this here. But
I think in the case of AI, I think certain kinds of jobs, not necessarily sort of low-level jobs, but actually high-level jobs will probably go. And I think it was very interesting, Kamala, one of our keynote speakers, I think it was yesterday, was talking about the fact that his research person, who was the CFA and so on, had gone off to another job, and he replaced that person with AI. So the AI was actually doing his research and so on for him. So our job was gone, but AI essentially replaced that level of job. I mean, lawyers are at risk, I think, because it is going to be the case, that AI can do a lot of the kind of research and so on, not necessarily perfectly, but that people like lawyers can do. Any comment, Kamala, on what we've been hearing?
My thought on that specifically actually is because I've been through that transformation process as well, where you stop doing certain things, which means you no longer need those tasks done. But people generally will embrace it when they see what the end result is going to be and they see a place for them. So my hope is that in this new world, we will have, for instance, when you go to hospitals, and there's a shortage of nurses because the nurses, they have to attend to so many different tasks at the same time, that they should have the AI assistants that's helping them with updating the medical records and all the things that they are challenged with doing. They could focus on the empathy side of dealing one-on-one with the patients. And if we extrapolate that out through the public sector, it should mean that a lot of the back-end processes where the backlogs happen, where people don't get service because you can't get certain things done, all of that can be eliminated, but new jobs are created because people's expectation for the level of service now have become, I expect this same day, I expect to come and get it within 10 minutes, and therefore you need the manpower people to manage that process and ensure that you keep the level of efficiency that the system now is designed to give you. So I think it's exciting times.
And Doctor, if I should say this too, at the hospital, digitalizing electronic health record. I have a large medical records department. They sit down, go through medical records, coding of diseases, capturing different stats that we need. Now, those people, we're going to start in a month time, start training them on informatics.
Right.
So while they no longer have to pull the information from the charts, they can pull the back-end reports and help to interpret them.
Yes.
Yes.
Because we see a decrease and we see an increase in a specific service. We see pattern trends and so forth and seasons. But we need some people to start working to analyze these data. And that's something my medical records people, we will in another month time, it's a virtual training for a month. We will start training those people. So upskill, and that's upskilling them to take the next available roles that will be available.
Yeah.
And that will be necessary, Robbie, as your president talks about this modern state with faster delivery.
I was just going to talk about, actually raise that point with Robbie about what the finale statement this morning, and whether the impetus for digital transformation, where should it come from, if I put it that way? I mean, for NGC, I presume it's a case of, well, I'm not quite sure whether that comes from your board, just from your board. It certainly is not coming from the other state enterprises. Where does it come from? Where should it come from? Where's the best place for it to come from? And I think if you have your president like Irfan Ali talking that kind of thing about digital transformation and the need to move there and so on, I think it could be a very, very powerful motivator for the entire state sector, public service and state enterprises, to be able to move in that direction.
It does. Because, for example, we were engaging PAHO because we need to have some sort of operation efficiencies at the hospital and improve of services, effective services. And I was engaging PAHO on many fronts, on many bits and pieces of electronic medical records. You know, we have about 6 different medical records in different specialty clinics. And, you know, we had this conversation. He saw when we launched one of them in our ambulatory care, he saw it in the news. And then he decided, no, we will have a comprehensive thing. And so I can safely say that the electronic health record that we are implementing here was a top-down approach from the president himself. So that removes all our bureaucracy and red tapes and justification why we need this. And that's why I'm saying, that's why I said earlier, we have leaders in the Caribbean, not only Irfan Ali. I have listened, I never used to pay attention to CARICOM, but after CARICOM saved our elections last in 2020, after I started paying attention to them. We have powerhouses, Mia Motley, we have the guy from Grenada. We have the guy from Grenada. We have big powerhouses. We got guys, big powerhouses in the Caribbean that are walking that talk. And that's a good thing, the top-down approach, rather than the bottom-up, which was 20, 30 years ago, way of doing modus operandi.
Well, let me just also say, I mean,
spoke comprehensively about Guyana and its geographic location and energy costs, and reliable energy and costs will cut by 75%. And he spoke extensively on why he thinks it will be the region, the hub for the region. It's a good presentation.
But let me say, I mean, last week I was.
We have a question in the chat. I'm sorry. I
see. Okay.
Bring it to your attention, and we have 5 minutes to end time. So I want to make sure we get Novak's question, and I think it's directed to Venishea. He was asking, do you use any standards to benchmark the various governance processes that you would have described? And once Venishea is finished answering Dr. Farrel, maybe we could begin.
Do you wind up? Okay, sure.
Yes, I can say yes. We in fact do align to the ISO standards. So we would have utilized governance of organizations with the 37,000. We also used the ABC management systems, which I think is 37,001. In terms of our policy development, we've used whistleblowing management, 37,002. We've also used our compliance management system ISO standard, which is 37,301, right? We also align with the Trinidad and Tobago Corporate Governance Code 2024. So we were happy to be part of that as well. We do, in fact, make sure that we align with that as closely as we can, because, of course, there are some deviations that you would have naturally occurring because of you being a state enterprise. And we also look at OECD for guidance as well. Even Chamber, the Chamber guidelines on corporate governance and the central bank. So even if it's not directly guiding us as a state enterprise in energy, we do look at it to see what is the generally accepted positions for governance across board, and we do try to build our systems. And if I may, I just wanted to kind of add to what Robbie said. It's always a benefit if you get top-down direction in relation to building your system, but not all the time are you that lucky. What I can say is that NGC, because we understood the importance, not only how, because we're working, I mean, as a state enterprise trying to build something that is a bit odd for you, you are pushing. You know that you start uphill battle one time. Right. So what you need if you're doing anything like that, and lawyers would know that, you have to have your case law, your backups, your evidence. So for us, that's the ISO standards, the OECD, where we have the backing of proper and aligned international practices guiding us. And what we can do now is that we can now sell that and push it forward. So what you have is that, thank God, we've been very lucky to have leaders within the organization who agreed with it, with digitization and advancement in that regard, and building good and strong compliance and governance systems. We would have had that. And then we were also lucky enough to have chairman who would have also had the same perspective. And of course, it pushed forward that way. So that is how we were able to get a lot of things forward, because we onboarded them. And that was another reason for the development of the governance strategy, because we have strategies guiding everything else: finance, technology, many things within our organization. Governance and compliance does not tend to be one. And we thought that it was very critical to be able to have the board on, aligned specifically with that by approving the strategy, which we now execute and report on like we do with any other strategy within the organization. So it's one way of getting that support and pulling it in with the basis, even if you don't have, you're not as lucky to get a president telling you that this is where they want us to go.
Okay. So I just want to say, Kamla, before we ask the final comments, last week I was in the Bahamas at the conference of chief justices and heads of judiciaries around the region, and to say that the judiciaries in the region, particularly in Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago is not doing badly in that regard and so on, are doing a really very good job in terms of implementing, digitizing a lot of the stuff that they're doing, developing their performance metrics and so on in respect of the performance of the judiciaries, and putting in place the kinds of institutional arrangements and so on to improve the delivery for people who are using the court system. So maybe next conference that you're having, you might want to, see if you can invite maybe people from the judiciary as well to talk about some of the things that they are doing. So with that, let me ask Robbie, Venishea, whether they have any final closing comments that they want to make on the subject.
I think I have said quite a bit.
Okay. Did you have a written presentation, or you were talking off the cuff?
No, I don't have a written presentation.
Okay, all right.
I have a piece of paper that I scribbled on here.
I see.
Yeah.
All right, that works. Venishea?
I would just end, if I can, by just saying, I know that Robbie would have mentioned it, that costs, and I think he mentioned it a few times. I actually made a note that cost can be a restrictive factor, and as a state enterprise, that's one of our biggest concerns. Not everybody is on the same footing in that regard. NGC perspective may not be the same as a state enterprise that gets subventions, for instance. But even in that regard, I don't think you should allow that to be a permanent hindrance to your digitization journey. I think you still have to commit to it. And one of the ways that we can do that, and I did try to kind of drive that home during the presentation, is really using the resources you have. Because several of the products or solutions that I would have mentioned were in fact built within NGC, which means we didn't have to go out, go through the procurement process and bring in a very expensive external system to do the same things that we're doing. And we are getting the benefits of having a digital system nonetheless, right? So it is just an encouragement I want to give to others that there's still possibilities if you innovate enough and you look for the possibilities within the space that you have. And that'd be it.
And are those systems, you think, potentially shareable with other
Yes, I think
entities?
they are quite shareable. For instance, we
Mm.
use SharePoint, which is a basic system that a lot of companies have operating in the back end. So they are
Yes.
quite shareable. It's just really, as I
Mm.
said, that collaboration opportunity. If people are
Right.
willing to work with each other, as
Mm.
you learn and innovate, you can help that
Right.
spread that through the state sector. So we look forward to
Yeah.
opportunities. NGC is always here. If you need
Yeah.
to find us, you know how. And yeah,
Right.
we'd be
Yeah.
more than happy to assist anyone.
Yeah. Fantastic. Great. Well, thank you very much, Venishea. Thank you, Robbie. Thank you,
Okay.
Andre. He's not here, but for his presentation on Jamaica Stock Exchange, and to Kamla for what was, I think, really an excellent session on respect of what's happening in the state sector, which is critically important, I think, in all of our economies. Uh, we sometimes might perhaps tend to underestimate um, the what the state sector brings. But when you talk about things like the health, what's happening in health, what's happening in education, these are very critical areas for the well-being and the welfare of the national community. And to the extent that we have improvements in productivity and improvements in efficiency and effectiveness and so on in those agencies, it just simply lifts the entire society going forward. So really wonderful. Thank you very much for really excellent presentations. Venishea, if you have something written, you might want to share it with Kamla so she can share it with the rest of us. And thank you all, and to thank you to the audience for being here.